Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas, and this series is going to be all about creating a nice and simple high-low card game in Unity, and it can be used for either PC or mobile depending on your own preferences. So we'll be designing it from scratch, and if you're brand new to Unity, don't worry at all. Everything here will be taught to you as you go through this series, and there's a lot to learn, but if you have used Unity before, you may find this a little easy, but it's always good to see tips and tricks on how things can be achieved throughout development. So the question is, how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to use C# coding, we're going to use some textures for the visuals, and we're going to just go with the flow and build it as best we can. Now, as I said, it is simple to a degree, but you can always advance on what we learn in this series and build it bigger and better. And I always encourage that, to build bigger and better from what I teach in these tutorials. So we will be going from an absolute beginner level to a standard level of development. So like I say, if you are brand new, this should be pretty interesting for you to go with. So this will work in all versions of Unity as long as you're using something from at least 2015, and that's a long way in the past now, so hopefully you are using it. I will be using version 2020 in this series, but by the time you see this there may be another version. Don't worry, this will be future-proofed as well, as long as something drastic doesn't change within Unity, and that isn't likely to happen. So when you first get Unity open, you'll be presented with the hub, and you can see it just behind here. And I've already gone ahead and clicked on this new button up here to create a new project, and you can call it anything you want right here. It doesn't really matter one little bit, and you can put it anywhere you want, absolutely anywhere on your drive. Again, it doesn't really matter as long as you know where it is, but then again, Unity keeps track of it anyway. Now, if you don't have this option here, you may need to go to Installs and add a version of Unity. So you'll be able to click Add and add any version of Unity which is supported. And I do recommend going for the latest official releases rather than the pre-releases. You can see here that there are some pre-releases ahead of the version I have. They can be a little bit buggy and a little bit fiddly to play around with, so I would always recommend the latest official release. Now, when you have your project open, you will have it looking a little something like this. And it really doesn't matter whether we're in 2D or a 3D environment. It honestly doesn't matter too much because we're only going to be dealing with 2D. So theoretically, you could just have it 2D, but again, even if you have it 3D, it's not going to make much of a difference. It will still function the exact same. Now, this is the default layout for Unity itself. It may look a little daunting for new people to Unity, but there's some things on here that we don't really need to use, and a couple of things that don't even really need to be here, but we can move and modify them. Now, over here we have the hierarchy. The hierarchy is a nice, easy way of storing game objects in a list form, and we can see we're able to click them one by one here. You'll notice though, as we do that, it highlights here in what is called the scene view. The scene view is where we can physically see all of these objects that we have stored in our hierarchy. So you can see if we click them, we can select them here. We can also do the same here, click and select. And currently there are two game objects in our scene, which is a main camera and a directional light. Some quick tips for the scene view. We can hold down the right mouse button and we can pan around. We can hold down the middle mouse wheel and we can shift around, and obviously we can also select with the left mouse button there. Next along we have the game view. The game view is a way of seeing what is physically in our game. So if we've created something in our scene, we can then press play and we will see it in the game view, and we can physically interact with it. So if we've got a button on our screen that we can press, we'll actually be able to press it in here. You can think of it in short terms as a way of emulating what your game is in Engine rather than build the game itself. So up here you'll notice that I did indeed press this play button and it has turned blue. That's an indication that our playability is active. So what we've built we can physically play in the game view. Now we do have two more tabs up here. We have the asset store and the animator. I'm not going to go into them because we're not going to be using the asset store in this series. We're going to use all our assets ourselves. which does remind me, any assets we use throughout this video or series will be linked in the pinned comment below. So if you don't know where to get assets from, they're in the pinned comment just below. Over here we have the inspector panel and something called navigation next to it. Now we don't need the navigation because that is just there to kind of illustrate something in just a moment. But the inspector panel is a way of storing information for each game object. So you can see here we have the directional light selected. Over here we have a transform component and a light component. So each section here is known as a component. Every game object must have at least the transform component. That determines where the object is positioned, the way it's rotated, and how big or how small it is. Each object has to have that. Next one here is light. So only a light source would really have this component. You can see you can change multiple different options here specific to the light. Same applies for the camera. It has that transform component, but it also has that camera component that you can change each individual aspect. So we can add components if we ever need to by clicking on add component, and we can type anything we want in there. So if we wanted to put in a collider, we could type collider and it would start bringing ones up. And obviously we could click and it would add in that particular component. Now we don't really need a box collider on a main camera, so we could always right click on it and then we can go remove component. Nice and simple. So this navigation tab up here is something which is used for artificial intelligence and moving around to a degree. We don't really need it. So if we select it, we want to get rid of it. What's a cool way to get rid of it? Well, trick is all these windows can actually be moved around. So if you hold the left mouse button down and drag this out, you'll notice it becomes a separate object. You can then close it, get rid of it. And you can always bring it back as well if you want to by going to Window, and you've got the selection here of all these different things. And for example, that navigation one is in AI, and if we click navigation, it would reappear. Another way is if we click the little dots anywhere, we can also add a tab this way. For example, we can have the animation tab. We will be using that one later on, and we do already have it down here, but we will get around to that when we actually need it. Speaking of down here, what is all this? This is our project window. This is where we can store all of our assets, all of our scripts, all of our textures, all of our sounds. Everything here is stored within this section down here. Next along is the console. If we have any errors within our script, this is where it's going to end up. So if we've misspelt something in a script, don't know where the problem is, we can actually go to the console and it will tell us what the error is and where to find it. Animation, like I say, something we will use. It's a way of simply animating something within Unity. Nice, quick, and easy. And if you don't have that animation tab, as I said, you can click those three dots, click on Add tab, and then click on Animation, and it will bring this panel into view. What else can we do? Well, because we're actually aiming for mobile and PC with this, I kind of want to start off by shifting how this looks visually and kind of present it in a mobile sense for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the hierarchy over here. I'm going to uncouple the game and also have it here so we can physically see what we're building in a mobile format, so in portrait mode. So let's take the hierarchy and let's move it over here. Let's take the game view and let's move it here. So now we've shifted a couple of things around and we can see things a little better. So imagine if this was the phone screen. There we go, we're ready to build it. So next, let's go to File and let's go to Build Settings. The build settings are a way of determining what your target platform is, and anything you build in Unity can be ported to any supported platform. So if we've got PC, UWP, iOS, Android, PS4, Xbox, and obviously as more and more technology comes out, for example, now we have the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S, these will be supported, but you would just need to get the actual license for that. For example, if we go on PS4, we see it doesn't cover. Usually you will probably have to pay for this kind of stuff, but we do things free on this channel, so I'm not going to bother with consoles or anything like that for now. We're just kind of going for PC and mobile devices. So for now, let's say we're going to build for Android. Let's click on Android and let's click on Switch Platform, and it will take just a second to switch its target platform over. It's worth noting, though, as soon as you do this, it may kind of freeze up just for a moment. The bigger the game, the longer it will take to switch the platform over. So just keep in mind that if you've built a massive game and you've built it for PC, but then want to make it for mobile devices, it may take a little longer than what mine has just done there. Mine was about 24, 25 seconds. So where do we go from here? Well, this is the basic layout of Unity, like I say. And what we're in here is known as a scene. And this scene comes as standard right here. So it's called sample scene. We're going to stay in that scene, but let's actually save it for now. So let's go File and Save. So that scene is saved no matter what. Now, I want to bring in an actual texture at some point. So I think next tutorial is going to be adding all the textures that we'll need. But for now, we need something to put that texture on. So we need to go and add in some UI elements. Let's go to Game Object. Let's go to UI and let's go down to Image. And you'll see a big white blob appear here and over here. And let's also go to Game Object, UI, and let's add in a raw image. Now, both of these are technically the same, but they are very different. And you're thinking, Jimmy, how can they be the same but technically different? Well, the way they work is you can think of it as adding a sprite, in this case on the image, and adding a full-blown texture onto a raw image. Now, we'll be using both of these throughout development, and it's something I know a lot of people do get mixed up and confused about as to why there are image and raw image and what the difference is. They will become apparent, especially when we start adding sprites onto these actual objects. So we can move these around, like so, dragging the arrows, and it doesn't really matter how far they come in or out on the Z or Z axis. It's only really the X and Y that we're dealing with. Now you can create some kind of cool effects. I'm just holding Control and pressing Z or Z there. It's kind of undo everything, and Y to redo. So Control Y to redo what you've just undone. And you can actually play around here with the rotation. You can see it rotates, but it does kind of create a unique and interesting effect over here. Now, because we are in a 3D environment, we can physically see this rotating three-dimensionally. However, it isn't visible here because everything in the canvas, which is this right here, is all on a 2D scale. What is the canvas? The canvas is a way of storing all of our two-dimensional UI elements, in this case, our two images. So I'm just going to set that back to 0 on the rotation, and obviously it does work on all the other rotations as well. You can see there how it looks. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to set a background all the way across here. And for now, let's select the raw image. Let's click on this little icon here. This is a way of anchoring, and an anchor is a way of making it fit or be specifically placed no matter what the screen size is. So if we were to select this down here, it would be to cover the entire screen no matter how big or how small it is. So to get that fully stretched out, we just need to select left 0, top 0, right 0, bottom 0. And you can see here it is completely white, which is exactly what we want. We could also change the color to a nice dark green, so we can set that there. And all I've done there is just click on this little color section here, and we can change everything, even the alpha if we wanted to. So you can kind of see a faded green effect. For now, we're just going to leave it very dark green. So first things first, there will be a link below in the pinned comment for you to get hold of the textures that I'm about to use. So what you'll need to do is download it and unzip those textures, and you'll see them looking a little like this. So I'm going to select all of these textures, including this cards folder, and drag and drop them straight into Unity. Now you'll notice I have dropped them here in this section below, which is the project window. Remember, this is where all of our assets get stored. So all you need to do is literally just drag and drop into Unity. It will take just a second to import, and there we go. There they all are. Now let's organize this up a little bit more than what they are. Let's click here on our scenes, and you'll see that this is where we've dropped all of those textures. Now, we don't really need them in here, do we? Because they're not scenes, they're textures. So let's use this opportunity and create a new folder. Down here, make sure we're clicked on Assets, right click, Create, Folder, and let's call this Textures. And you can open that folder. See, nothing in there. First things first, let's drag this cards folder from scenes into textures. So hold the left mouse button and you can see we're able to drag it and just drop it into textures. And then same with these other textures. Let's select this one, this one, this one, and this one, and drag them into textures as well. So you can see now that we only have that scene in that folder and we have all the textures in this folder. Now let's apply the background texture. So currently it's just green, there's not a lot to it. So let's click on the raw image that is actually that background. Let's right click and let's click on rename and we'll call this background. Now how do we make this texture appear on this object? Well, remember when we changed the color to a dark green? Well, let's change it back to white. And then let's drag and drop this texture over here onto this texture section. So drag and drop. And there we go. And we can see there is our texture right there. So that's looking kind of better already rather than just that dull dark green. Now, the key thing what we need to do here is we need to work with our cards, and they're all going to be done via images rather than a raw image. You'll see the reason why in just a moment, but we do need to make sure that it is an image, and we do have one of them images already. Now what I am going to do is I am going to take this image and I'm going to move it outwards. Now the reason I've done that is because that is no longer shown on screen no matter what. It's always going to be off screen. So this white line, which is our canvas, everything inside is seen in the screen right here. Everything outside of it is not visible. Now we're going to start with the number 2 card. So let's go to cards and let's select this number 2 card. Make sure we're on the image and then drag and drop over here. Oh, of course. Hopefully you spotted that. Why didn't that work? Why didn't that work? It's because it's not a sprite. Well done if you got that. Hope you did. So number 2 is currently a texture, as are all the others. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all of those cards. And you'll notice over here in the inspector panel, we have texture type is set as default. Let's click on there and let's click on sprite and then click on apply. And what that will do is change its type so we can use it on an image. And if I drag and drop number 2 now onto there, we can see it does indeed change to number 2 card. Now the reason it has to be a sprite is if we look at the rounded corners, we can actually see through this right here. If it were a texture, that would be black. And I'll show you what I mean by that a little later on, probably in the next tutorial. But there is a reason, again, why we use image and raw image for different things. Now, let's bring this number 2 card back into view here. And you'll notice it is behind our background. If we move the background up in the canvas, it will place it behind. Now, it's always a good idea to kind of keep in mind how everything in the canvas works in the order of everything. So the higher up the list, the further back it appears. The further down the list, the further forward it appears. So the bottom most object in the canvas will be the most forward object you see on the canvas, the one right in front. So now let's resize this card. So we're going to have our cards probably somewhere in the middle, but that's not quite in the middle. So we're going to use something called the rect tool to align it to the center. So over here we have this rect tool. Looks like a square with small squares at the corners. Select, and you can see our object is now surrounded by blue. So we can resize this to make it look a little better. You can make it however you want. But the key thing here is we're able to move it. And you'll notice that as we move it, it starts snapping to different places. And you can see there, we have a blue line up and a blue line across. That means we've snapped it to center. Now we just need to align this a little better, resize it a little better. So we're going to have the width as, let's say 70. That's probably too small, isn't it? Let's have 100, and let's have the height as 180. That's probably not good enough. I'm going to say 120 and 180. Okay, that looks a little better. So now let's move this to be aligned in the center. So about there. I don't want it right in the middle, but I want it around about there. Now, because the way this is going to work, this is going to be the card that we get dealt. So we need another card here to represent the card that we are going to try and guess high or low. So let's take this image, hold Control and press D to duplicate. And then we have created a duplicate of that object. We can't quite see it right now, but if we move this across, we can see there it is. So now we have this. We have one card, which is going to be the one we see, and another card, which is going to be the one we get dealt when we press deal if we're going to guess high or low. So let's start renaming these cards. This first one I'm going to rename as guess card, and this second one is going to be named as turn card. And obviously there's going to be random generation here to generate random cards, but that's a little later on in the series. Next, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have every possible card in the scene. So I'm going to take that turn card, hold Control and press D, and I'm going to move this off screen to there. And I'm going to keep this as 2. And I'm sure you can probably guess what we're going to do now. We need to duplicate that several times. So let's hold Control, press D, let's rename it to 3. And let's drag and drop the 3 card onto there. And same again. Change that to 4. And this process may seem a little daunting. It may seem a bit annoying. But don't forget, some of these things can be really complicated to do. And essentially what we're doing here is so simple. Like I said, this whole process and creating this game is a very simple way. And to be fair, I think even by now, most of you guys may have already realized how we're going to approach this and how we're going to do it. And I really hope you have, because this is going to be a lot of fun to create. So you can see all I'm doing at this point is duplicating the previous card. So this is number 9. Drag and drop the 9 of hearts onto there. Duplicate that one. This is going to be number 10, which is going to be that one. Now, before I go any further, you'll notice that we do indeed have 11, 12, 13, 14. Now, 11 is Jack, 12 is Queen, 13 is King, 14 is Ace. Ace is going to be high for us no matter what. It's not going to be low, it's going to be high. You can change that if you want to. It's entirely up to you. But essentially, all cards are going to have a number allocated one way or another. And obviously, the higher the number, the more important it is. So in this case, so we make sure that even though a Jack and Queen are both equal to 10, we still need to make sure that the value of them, the Queen always beats the Jack. So we're going to deal with numbers in that sense. So this is Queen. So let's drag the Queen to there. And then we've got the King, and he's going to be allocated as 13. And finally, the Ace, which is going to be number 14. So all of our cards that we're going to use are now allocated here. And they are all on top of each other, but like I said, in the hierarchy of things, we can see that number 14, the Ace, is always going to be on top because that is the bottommost card. If we were to have 10 there, that will be there. So even though you can only see the Ace, rest assured, all of our cards are there in the same position. Now, another great way that we can actually manipulate all of this is we're going to have 2 specific versions of each card. Now, although we have these here, these are only going to be placeholders for now, this guess card and turn card. The reason being is because we're going to use our ability to create all of these cards in those specific spots. So this tutorial is all about creating the visuals of it, so don't worry about how we're going to present cards. That will come probably in the next tutorial. So the next thing we need to do is we need to have buttons on here. So we need to have a deal button, and we also need to have a high button and a low button. So let's have a little panel at the bottom of our screen where we have our buttons. So let's go to Game Object, let's go to UI, and let's go to Raw Image. And this is going to be anchored down the bottom. Let's have the color as black. And let's have, in fact, now I think about it, let's have this stretch the bottom just so as it's always the same width as our game. So let's reset the anchor up here and stretch across the bottom. And let's position this down here. And then let's bring it across here. And you can see I'm using the rect tool again to snap these sides to each section. There we go. I'm going to bring it up just a little bit, probably to about there. So next thing, we need 3 buttons. Let's go to Game Object, UI, and let's click on Button. Now I'm not going to go into buttons too much. All we're going to do is texture them in this one. It's going to be the next tutorial where we really get to grips with how buttons work. But for now, let's move this button down here. Let's go to our textures, and let's take these 3 buttons. We've got the deal card, high button and low button, and much like we did with the cards, let's set them to sprite and click on apply. Next, let's re-click on our button, and we just need to drag and drop this deal card button over here on the UI sprite. Next, we click the arrow next to the button, and all that does is opens up an option for us to see what the text says on the button. In this case, we don't need it to have any text because our button already says deal card on it. Now let's resize that button. So we can select the button once again here. And let's have the height as 100. Does that look okay? I think that looks okay. And then let's bring it down to about there. So we've got our deal card. Now next to it, we're going to have high and low. So here's a cool trick. Let's duplicate that button by holding Control, pressing D, and let's bring it out this way. And let's apply this high to the source image. So high up there. And let's also decrease the height to probably about 48. And let's bring it upwards to there. And let's hold Control, press D to duplicate once again. And let's bring this down to about there. And add low right there. Now, before we finish this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on play. And when it's turned blue, as I said, we can play around with what we have here. So at this point, our buttons flash when we click them. Now, the great thing about this is we don't need any extra coding for them to work with mobile devices. Buttons you create in Unity automatically work whenever you tap the screen. That is the beauty of all of this. Because it's so simple in that creation, it can be used for PC and mobile without any real extra effort. And that's why I like Unity in so many different ways. So currently we have this set of cards over here, and we have these 2 placeholder cards right here. Now the trick is to turn these 2 placeholder cards into this deck and another deck. So let's take this opportunity to select all of these and place them in one single group. Now, what I mean by one single group is keep them all contained, just to kind of keep things nice and tidy. So on the number 2 card, right click and click on Create Empty. And all that will do is create a game object which contains nothing. It literally contains absolutely nothing. It might be worthwhile kind of stretching this out a little bit to fit the size of the cards, but I guess it doesn't really matter too much. Now let's select this game object and align it with this card here, which is going to be the guess card. So drag and drop over here and hold Control, press D to create another one, and drag that over here to this side. So that means this game object can now be called our guess card. So guess card deck. And this second game object can be called turn card deck. There we go. I got there in the end. So I'm going to bring this one up here. And now I'm actually going to delete the original guest card and the original turn card. Next thing, we're going to place all of these cards from 2 to 14 into guest card deck. And you can just see the outlines of those right there, but nothing over here. That's how we want it to be right now. So select all those cards and drag and drop them into guest card deck. But actually, now I think about it, what I think might be better is if we actually set this guest card deck over here and then place them all in. The reason being is because when I think about it slowly and methodically, we don't then need to move everything all back to the same position. So if we select all of our cards and place them inside guest card deck, when we move guest card deck, we'll be able to move everything together rather than individually. So next thing we need to do is hold Control and press D on all of those, and we will create another set. Next thing we need to do is create, or rather move the turn card deck over this one so they're all on top of each other. And all of those duplicates we just created, let's place them inside the turn card deck. So select all and drag and drop them into here. And then let's move turn card deck over here. So now that's all in position. We have our guest card deck, all the cards right there, and our turn card deck right there. So all the cards in turn card deck can now be turned off. These only appear after we've clicked either high or low. So if we select all of those again, these are all the duplicates, remember, and then select this tick and remove it. Awesome. So all we have here are all of these cards. Now, how are we going to make a card appear? Well, this is where the C# comes in. And to kind of make this as an illustrative point, so you can see this physically working whenever we press deal card, let's also turn all of these guess cards off. So, off. We see nothing. So, let's get to work on our script to make a card appear. So let's go to Assets. Let's right click, Create, Folder. We'll call this Scripts. And in here, we need to create a C# script. So, right click, Create, C# script. And we'll call this Deal Card. Now, I have capital D and a capital C, no spaces. It is important what you call this script, and it will become apparent a little later on. So let's then open that up, and it will open up in Visual Studio, but you don't have to use Visual Studio. You could use anything really. A long time ago, there used to be something called MonoDevelop, which came with Unity, and you could use that. But most people will be using Visual Studio. So when you open it up, it will look like this. And we're going to go through a couple of things here. Some things important, some things not. The first 3 lines at the top are known as namespace. And that is, think of it as a way of the script recognizing where it needs to look to get information from. If there was nothing declared up there, then the script would have no idea what it's doing. So by default, that always appears, and you shouldn't really play around with it. We don't need to play around with them, at least not at the moment. Next, you'll see public class, and this is called deal card. You'll notice that right there is the exact same name as what the script is. That's important. The class has to be the same as the script name, otherwise it won't be able to work. Further down, we have an open curly bracket, and you'll notice this line all the way down to the closed curly bracket. This is encompassing everything it needs to inside the class. So this is the opening and this is the closing. You'll also notice that it also does apply to these. These are known as methods. So where we've got void start, that's a method. Void update, that's a method. A method contains the code that gets executed. So for example, if we had in void start, we wanted something to appear, that's where the code would be. Now we also have some green here. These are known as annotations. An annotation is a way of kind of indicating or giving a bit of guidance or information on what specific bits of code do, and they're normally preceded by 2 front slashes. So if it goes green, it means that line of code won't be executed and it's just for information purposes. So that's basically what we get greeted with when we create a C# script. But what do we need to put in here to make a card appear? So we're going to go simple first off, because I know C# coding can be difficult for a lot of people, especially if you haven't coded before, or if you're not used to C# or just don't understand. I always feel that with coding, start small and build up. It really helps you understand a lot more rather than diving in headfirst to big, massive, complicated lines of code. So we need to establish what we need to do. Well, first things first, we need a card to appear when we've pressed a button. That card needs to be a variable in this script. So let's start by creating a variable. So if we go to the open curly bracket at the top, which is after the public class, let's declare our first variable, which let's just say is going to be the ace of hearts for now. We're going to say public, and its type is going to be a game object. Now, there are multiple different types of variables. And when I say multiple, I mean, well, a lot of multiple different types. But the major ones that we're ever really going to use in this series is integer, game object, and a boolean. So a boolean would be true or false. An integer would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It would be a whole number. And obviously a game object would be a game object. So in this instance, we need it to be a game object because that ace of hearts is a game object in our scene. So public game object, and we'll just call this dealt card with a semicolon at the end. Now we have to have a semicolon at the end because this allows the script to recognize that this is the end of the line of code. Move on to the next one. Now, if you do have any red underlining at any point, you may have typed something incorrect, you may have accidentally deleted something. So just make sure that you have typed everything correctly. And capitalization is massively important when it comes to programming. I can't stress enough, it is important. So make sure with game object it is a capital G and a capital O. Next, let's get rid of this annotation because we don't need it. Let's get rid of this annotation because we don't need it. And in fact, let's get rid of these two methods because we don't need them. We're going to write our own method. So we have a variable here. So the script will know, well, when we tell it what the card is, it will know where that card is. And what we need to do is make it so when we press the button, that card appears. How do we do that? Well, we need to create that method for the button. Now, you saw earlier the start method and update method were just void start, void update. When it comes to buttons, we do need to make the method public. So in this case, we go public void, and this can be called anything. You can call the method anything you want as long as it's not something like Unity Engine or the same name as the script itself. Call it something sensible. So let's say this is going to be deal my new card, open close bracket, parentheses, and open curly bracket. And now we can start typing the lines of code that this script will use to make that card appear. And it is in fact just one simple line of code to make this happen. We need to set it active. So we can say dealt card dot set active, and in brackets, true, semicolon. That's all there is to it. And save. So let's go through what we've done here. We've told the script that there is a variable called dealt card. And when this method is executed, which is called deal my new card, it means that that dealt card will become visible. So let's head back into Unity and make sure all this functions correctly. It is just compiling. If you kind of see it freeze for a little bit and then a ring appears, it is just compiling. Don't worry about that. If you do have any errors, check your console and it will display here what the error is in your script. Next thing, thanks Malwarebytes, I do need to update you. So next thing is going to be adding that script to the scene and making it work. So if we go to game object, go on create empty, and I'm going to drag this all the way up to the top, and I'm going to rename this as, let's just have it as settings. So most settings for the game are going to be applied to this game object, so we have one single place that we can play around with and make things work. So let's now add this deal card script to settings. So we can drag and drop up here, and you'll see over here dealt card. That's the variable that we created earlier. We can now tell the script and tell Unity what card that dealt card is going to be. So let's make it for now just card number 2, and make sure we're on this guess card deck because it's going to be the one on the left hand side. So drag and drop that over there. Next thing we need to do is make the button know where to find the script for it to work. So if we click on that deal card button, and if we scroll down, you'll see down here we have on click list is empty. Let's click on that plus there, and this appears above it. We need to tell it where the game object is, where the script is. So in this case, it's settings. So drag settings down here, and you'll see this no function highlight. It's a drop down list. So we can select from that drop down list our script that we created, which is deal card. And in that list, you should see deal my new card. So if we click that, what this means is that whenever this button is clicked, it will execute that method that we just wrote. And that's really cool. So before we try this out, let's rename this button to be, let's have it as deal button. Nice and simple. And in fact, before we go any further and test this, let's actually play around with some of these colors. Now, what you can do, the normal color, is you could change it to red if you wanted to, or if you keep it white, it keeps it its original color, which is the texture basically that you downloaded in the last tutorial. But you can have this as any kind of color. If you want to have it a slight blue color, you can do that. But that was just the normal color. Highlighted color, you can select, let's say red, and pressed color, let's say black. And before we go any further now, let's actually test this out and see what these two colors really do to the button. And I've just realized I think I am still in play mode, which kind of doesn't help things. So actually, this is kind of a great indication of what could go wrong. Now, although we wrote that script, we were all in play mode at the exact same time. So everything we did won't have saved. And to be honest, this is something I get asked about a lot. So someone's done something, they've played the game, made all of this, but then they've tried playing it and it's all reset. So this is a great indication of how all of this works in a bad way sometimes. Always make sure you are not in play mode whenever you're making changes. Now, for someone like me, that's pretty quick and simple to kind of redo, because ultimately what it comes down to is the experience and swiftness that some people have when it comes to Unity. I guess it doesn't really matter too much, but hopefully you guys were not in play mode when we made all of those changes. So yeah, let's go through that. Guess card deck, and we'll move it to there. So basically, I'm just formatting it back how it was before everything went wrong. And you'll see that everything is pretty much as it was now, to be honest. And we had that as turn card deck, didn't we? So let's move that back up there. Reorder everything. And we had them all turned off, didn't we? That was right. So they were all unticked. There's been many times when I have been building a game and I've left it in play mode. Don't worry too much, in all honesty, don't worry too much. So let's add the settings back in. And I had that at the top, didn't I? Deal card, goes straight on there. And the dealt card is going to be number 2, right there. And you can see here just how quick and swift I'm being with this. It all comes with experience. Once you've been using Unity for a while, it just kind of flows, and that may have seemed disastrous that nothing saved, but in reality, it's a quick 2-minute job to kind of put back. So yeah, let's set the button up again. So button, And remember, it was plus. Add the settings, no function, deal card, and let's go have deal my new card. And we renamed that, didn't we, to deal button. And I think we had the highlighted color as red and the press color as black. So let's press play and let's see how that looks. So if we go over it, you can see that it does indeed highlight red, just like we wanted it to. And if we press it, it will turn black, but when we do press it, it should make that card appear here. Cool. You can see that when we press it, it does indeed make it black. So I'm going to undo that, but I'm actually going to have the press color set as, what should I have it set as? I think I might just have it as standard, to be honest, but I recommend playing around with it just a little bit. So let's try that once again, just make sure. Cool, it works. Now let's quickly try another card in there, just to make sure everything does work as intended. So let's have the number 8 card appear instead. And there we go, that does appear. So creating a random card to appear on screen is actually a lot easier than what you would think. As I said last tutorial, when it comes to coding, we start small and build up. So although we need to deal with an array here, let's start with just creating a random number first and foremost. So let's go back into our deal card script, and we're going to create another variable here. This variable is going to be a number that's generated either 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12. Reason for that is because that is how the array works. So 0 would be 2, 1 would be 3, 2 would be 4, and so on. So as long as we know that we're always dealing with 2 more than the physical number that we've created, I guess it's easy enough to remember. So public int, short for integer, and we'll have this as card generate semicolon. And the process of this is going to be when we press the deal card button, we need to set that active. So we need to randomize it after we press the button. So in this case, we're going to have card generate equals random with a capital R dot range, and in brackets we can actually select the range we want it to be. And like I said, there is a reason why we're not dealing with number from 2 to 14, simply because that's how the array is going to work. I mean, I guess we could always ignore 0 and 1 in the array, but for now, in fact, no. Do you know what? We're going to actually go into this a little bit more in depth than I wanted to, because I feel you guys deserve that bit of extra knowledge. So you know what? We are going to do 2 and 14. So we'll deal with 2, and instead of 14, we're actually going to put 15. Just one of those little quirks when dealing with random ranges. It will never generate the maximum number. It will always generate the one below. So in this case, if you want between 2 and 14, you've got to put 2 and 15. So 15 is the top level. That's maxed out. It can't go anymore. It can't get to that. So it's always going to be between 2 and 14. So we'll always put one more than the maximum value. And semicolon. Now, what that will do is it will generate either 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 14. And then what we'll also do is we need to make that equivalent card appear. But for now, let's just make sure this random range works. So let's head back into Unity. Wait for it to compile. Press play. And then make sure we are clicked on the settings. And if you look here, card generate is 0. And if we click deal card, it will generate 13. Keep doing it, it will generate a different number. Cool. Easy. Now what we've got to do is make it recognize what card that actually is. So back in deal card, what we're going to do is where we've got public game object dealt card, we're going to change this to an array. To do so, we just need to put open close on the square brackets. That will make this go red. Now the reason that goes red is because this needs to understand that it is supposed to be an actual array. So we can't just make everything there appear. We have to actually declare a number between, well, in this case, it's going to be 0 and 14. So if we do this now and put, let's say, open square bracket, 0, close square bracket, and save, we need to head back into Unity now. Re-click on the settings, and you should see that Dealt Card has now changed. How it looks is now with the arrow, and we can set the size right here. And we have 13 cards, don't we? Now, if we put 13, the problem that we have got is that we're generating from 2 to 14, remember. So remember earlier when I said that we need to deal from 0 to 12, and we're always 2 numbers behind? Well, we need to play around this a little bit more. We're going a bit more in depth. So element 0 and element 1 are never going to exist in this case. So let's set this as 15 just for now. We can probably play around a little bit more, but we just need to make sure that we do indeed put the correct cards here. So remember, 0 and 1 are going to remain as none. They're not going to be anything at all because of the way we've programmed this. So if we drag 2 onto 2, 3, 4, and so on. Be careful if you go a little bit wrong, just make sure that you do get the correct ones. You saw I did them a little out of order there, but it doesn't really matter. As long as the correct card goes on the correct object, everything will function just fine. And 14. So we now have all of those in place, and I'm going to save this scene just to make sure everything goes to plan. Now, what should happen when we press deal card, hopefully, fingers crossed, it should generate, let's say, number 9, and number 9 should appear. So let's press play. And let's try this. Okay. I know why. Hopefully you guys know why. So this is a really good opportunity now for us to explore the console. So we can see here we have an unassigned reference exception. What does that mean? It means that one particular line of code, if we double click it, can't be executed because it doesn't recognize, it doesn't understand. Do you remember we put number 0 in there? Well, we don't have anything in 0, do we? So that is the reason why that doesn't work. But the clever thing is we can actually replace that 0 with a variable. In this case, card generate. So if, like I said, number 9, for example, we want number 9 to appear, we could put number 9 in there, or we could put card generate and save. So what that will do is it will generate a number, let's say, like I say, number 9, and then it will say dealt card number 9 of the array, set it active. So if we head back into Unity and then clear that error, click back on project, press play, and we should have this all working perfectly. So there we go, we've generated the queen. We can see number 12 has appeared, card generate is indeed number 12, and it has made this appear. Now, one thing I will note, if we press it again, it will make different things appear. You can see all the cards coming on here, but we can't physically see them because, well, obviously the queen is the highest card here. If we end up generating 13 or 14, like that, it will appear. But all of these cards are indeed in the scene. It's just that we can't see them because we haven't cleared the queen. But there we go. Each and every time we press it, we do get cards appear, and it is randomized. There's number 4. So the idea of this is once we've dealt the card, we actually need it to theoretically disappear, I guess, because we don't want to be able to press it once again to make more cards appear. So what we can do is we can use a quick line of code after we've got the card on screen to make high and low appear and deal card disappear. So let's do that now. Let's set high card. In fact, let's rename them. Let's have high button and low button. And let's select both of those. turn them off. And let's go back into deal card and let's set those two objects as variables. So public game object high button semicolon, and second one public game object low button semicolon. And we also need the deal button as well, don't we? So public game object deal button semicolon. So let's get all of this in order. We need to have high button as on. So inside the deal my new card method, high button dot set active, and in brackets true. Low button dot set active, also true. And finally deal button dot set active false, because we want that to disappear. So if we save this now and we head back into Unity, remember this script is on the settings, so we just need to add those game objects, and I'm going to close up deal card because we don't need it right now. So high button is going to be there, low button there, and finally deal button is there. So I'm going to save my scene, save my project, and press play. So we can deal card, and there we go. We can either guess high or low, and obviously we can't quite guess just yet because we've not coded that just yet, but either way it still all works. So deal, so let's say, I don't know, higher than 4. If only that worked. So up until now, we have one script that basically just deals the card. And you can see I am currently in play mode, but these buttons don't work. So we at least want to get this high button working. But in order for that to happen, we actually need to have a script which controls the flow of the cards and what is currently on the board. So for example, if we dealt card number 4, we would need to store that somewhere else so we can compare if the next card is higher or lower depending on our choice. So we're going to create a new script. So down here, let's click on create and C# script. And this one will be card control. And let's open that up in Visual Studio. We've opened the other script up there. There we go. So just like the last one, this is how it looks by default. Now there are a couple of things that we do need to mention here. Firstly, we need to have a variable which keeps track of, like I say, that dealt card, but we need to declare that variable slightly differently. So other scripts need to talk to this script to tell it what the cards being dealt are, whether we've chosen high or low. And when we declare these variables, we need to set them as static. That way, any number we pass to this script can be read. So let's get rid of the annotations because we don't need them. Delete them out. And let's start by going public static. Remember, capitalization is massively important. So like I say, the word static will enable us to pass different variable types to this script. It's still going to be an integer, and it's going to be dealt card number. So what we'll do is we will pass whatever number we have dealt to that first stack to this script as well, because like I say, this script is going to be the one that compares what's going on. So on the flip side of that, we also need the new card number as well. So public static int, and we'll, what should we call this one? Let's just have this one new card number. Eventually we'll also have to pass that card over to the dealt stack if we get it right, because then we need to carry on the sequence. But don't worry about the sequence just for now, as long as we get the main mechanics working. So while we're here, because we have this new dealt card number variable in place, let's save that. And let's go to our original deal card script. And what we'll do is when we have dealt the card, we then need to go on a new line below and say card control, you see it right there, it's highlighted in a light blue, dot delt card number, and you can see it there in the list, and we'll make it equal to card generate with a semicolon. So now, at this point, once we've dealt the card, we see it on the screen, we've hidden the deal button and we've unhidden the high-low button. This now passes whatever card number we've dealt to this script. So at this point, this variable will be equal to example 4 if we've dealt the card number 4. So let's save that and save deal card for now, and let's head back into Unity. So remember the settings object that we had from the last tutorial? We just need to drag and drop card control onto it now, up there. And you won't see anything appear. Now, I must point out here that if we have a static variable in our script, it will not appear in the inspector panel. Don't worry about that at all. It will still work as intended. So we've dealt the card, we have that number. Now let's get that high button working. So let's have another script for that high button. So right click, create, C# script, high button. And let's open that in Visual Studio. There we go. So this is going to function similar to how deal card works, but in a slightly different manner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy from deal card those variables and the public void deal my new card. So I'm going to take all of that, copy, and place it in place of those methods and the annotations. Now, the reason I'm doing this is simply because rather than retype everything out, there's no point. We may as well copy what we've already written and just modify what we need to. So here once again we have public game object dealt card. We're going to keep that as it is. Same with the card generate. Now we don't actually need these buttons right now. We may do later on depending on how we approach the reset process, but for now we can get rid of those 3 variables, which also means we can get rid of these 3 lines of code down here. Now, next thing we need to change is this section here. So card control dot delt card number equals card generate, right? So card control, we also have new card number. So this is the new card that we are dealing. So if we think it's high, then we're dealing high. So we say card control dot new card number equals card generate. So at this point, if we save this script, now once we've clicked high, this will have all the information it needs to decide whether we have got that right, whether it is indeed high. Now, there is one question to ask at this point. If we draw the same card, do we win? I am going to go with yes. So if we've got, let's say, a 4 on the board and we say higher and another 4 comes out, then we have won. So I'm going to use annotations just to make sure in this script we know what happens. So let's have a double slash here, and we will say that equal number equals winner. Now, if you don't want that, later on when we kind of work out that script to do the math, I will tell you what you need to change. The reason I'm going to keep it like this is we are doing this simply because this is only 1 deck of cards. But if you were to do this with 4 deck of cards, then, for example, the number 4, there are other number 4s in there. So let's save that script. Now let's make sure what we've done so far actually works. So we need to drag and drop high button onto settings, and in there we need to go to delt card, and we have to have this the same as the original deal card script, which is 15. So if we set the size to 15, and remember we ignore 0 and 1. Now we need to go to turn card deck and apply all of those variables one by one to each slot. So hopefully you should be able to see what we've done here. What we're doing is we are duplicating the process but in a different way, which gives us much more ease and allows us to kind of control what's going on a lot better. there's no point writing tons and tons of lines of code when something like this can be done a lot easier. So once you've drag and dropped all of those into each section, we just need to make sure that the high button is indeed working. So let's go to high button, and much like we did with the deal button, we click on plus, and we drag and drop settings into non-object here, and no function lights up. We go to the drop down list, we'll go to high button, and we will go to, in fact, before we do that, what I would like to do is actually change this. Rather than have deal my new card, let's have this as deal high card. I think that's probably a little bit more sensible given what we're doing here. So deal high card, wait for it to recompile in Unity, and let's do that once again. So we've got settings in there, no function. Let's go to high button, and then we'll have deal high card. So let's set that there. And obviously there's much more to this. We need to restrict what's going on. We'll have some UI appear on screen, but that will all come when we put together how this is all working. So let's press play and see how this works. So deal card, we have a jack. Let's try and go high. And we did indeed get a higher card. Now, once again, we have the error of if we keep pressing this, you can see all of these lighting up because we're still dealing with the high card here. So there is a process of what we need to do at any given point. But for now, we have all of that working. So the same principle can be applied to the low button as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that high button, hold Control, and press D on the script, and it will duplicate it. So let's close Visual Studio, and you'll notice you do get an error on this one, but don't worry, we're going to modify this so we get rid of that error. Let's rename that high button 1 script to low button. And Visual Studio keeps opening up when it shouldn't, but never mind. And let's open up low button. Now, we are in low button, but you'll notice that the public class is highlighted. We need to change that name to low. And let's also change deal high card to deal low card. And save. Now, technically speaking, we don't really need both of these scripts to exist. The only reason I've done both of these scripts like this is to kind of illustrate how all of this works and how easy it can be to duplicate code rather than retype everything out. So if you want to leave a comment and say you didn't really need that second script, I know, don't worry. It's just to illustrate how quickly and easily code can be replicated and modified to suit any purpose. Anyway, let's apply that to settings and then to the low button. So drag and drop the low button script onto settings. And once again, yes, I know. It's all for illustration purposes. It's up to you whether you want to do it this way or not. You could theoretically apply the high button, but again, depending on what we're doing here, because this is a simple one, it would work if you apply the high button to the low button, or rather high button script to the low button. But if you are going much more advanced, you may need multiple scripts, depending on what you want to do, or multiple methods in one single script, which obviously you can do. So all of these are pretty much applied now. So that will mean that both our high and low buttons will work as intended once we've applied that script to the low button. So you can see how fast I'm doing this now. I think I mentioned it a couple of tutorials ago. Once you get so accustomed to Unity, you can just kind of flow through and get everything done really quick. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to press play and check out my low button and just make sure that works. So deal card, low, there we go. But once again, it does indeed add all the other cards. So up to now, we have our high button and our low button working, but all they do is repeatedly just generate the card. They don't really do anything special. So we need to add something extra to all of this to kind of understand what we're doing. So we need to tell our main card control whether we are doing a high guess or a low guess, and then based on that, whether we say it's correct or incorrect. Now we're going to do this a really cool and simple way, in all honesty, because again, this is a simple way of doing it. It's then your job to really make this much more advanced. So for now, let's go to Game Object, UI, and let's go with text. And this text is going to say, correct or incorrect, depending on what we're doing. So let's have this say in big capital letters, correct. And I'm over here in the text component. Let's make this much bigger. So let's have this as bold. Let's have the font size as 50. And let's have it aligned in the center. And let's have the color as bright white. Now make sure we have the rect tool selected. Let's take this over here and make it much bigger. And then I'm going to move it upwards to about there. And let's also anchor this. Let's have it stretched all the way across in the center. So it's going to be this one. And finally, what we'll do is we will rename this to say, oops, let me turn my caps lock off. Correct text. And then I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm sure you probably know, incorrect text. And let's change that to say incorrect. And I'm going to have this red, bright red. So now we have the opportunity to say, yep, it's right, or no, it's wrong. So let's turn both of those off. So select both in the hierarchy and then untick up here, and they're both off. So let's head to our scripts folder once again, and let's go to card control. Now what we need to do is add those two as variables. So let's go down and say public game object, remember, capital G and a capital O. And we'll say correct text. And once again, for the incorrect text, so public game object incorrect text, semicolon. Now, we also need to establish what we are doing. Are we guessing high or are we guessing low? And we can actually use a Boolean for this. So we're saying public bool guess high, and by default we're going to put false, and we're going to do the same again. Public bool guess low also equals false. Now what this will do is it will guarantee a default value is set for this specific variable. So both of them are going to be set false. So once we set one high, we can set a sequence in motion, and you'll see how that works once we actually get into the realms of dealing with void update down here. I think we can get rid of void start because we don't need it. We're not having a method start once and then that's it. We need to have this method running constantly so as it monitors what we're doing in the game. So down here, what we're going to do is we're going to have an if statement that says, are we guessing high or are we guessing low? And if one of those statements is true, it's going to run something called a coroutine. What's a coroutine? A coroutine is basically a way of having a method, but we're able to control time as well, because that's what we need to do here. We need to have certain instances of when we need time to stop in the game. So we can't do anything where we need to wait for perhaps an animation to play out or something like that. But for now, all we need to do is let's start with the high button, I think. Let's just start with high. So if, and in brackets, guess high equals, now it's a double equals here. The reason it's a double equals because it's asking. So usually when you see a double equals like that, it's asking. If you see a single equals, it's telling. So a good example of that is if we're stating something is equal to something, it's a single equals because we're stating. If we're questioning, if we're asking if something is equal to it, it's a double equal. So if guess high equals true, then open curly bracket, and this is what we're doing. Let's have the words start coroutine, and in brackets we can call this coroutine anything we want. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone outside of anyone that's developing this, but it's probably sensible to have a normal name in here. So start coroutine would be guessing higher, and then open close bracket, close bracket once again, and semicolon. Now, the words guessing higher will remain underlined in red at the moment. That's because that coroutine doesn't exist yet. So let's go ahead and write that coroutine. So below the update method, so if you follow this line all the way down, you'll see where the update method ends. We need to go below it. Now, to declare a coroutine, we don't type the word void. We type the word IEnumerator. So I in capital, E capital, enumerator. Make sure you don't go with IEnumerable because that will not work. So IEnumerator, guessing higher, open close bracket, open curly bracket, and it will still be underlined here. The reason it's underlined here is because you can think of it in some ways as it's expecting you to halt time to some degree because nothing exists in this coroutine just yet. That's obviously why. So let's actually make it wait for, let's say, 1 second, and then we can establish whether 1 second is long enough, too short, anything like that. So we need to type the words yield return new, and then we need to say wait 4 seconds, and in brackets let's type 1 and a semicolon. So at this point, at any point, if guess high becomes true, then this coroutine will run. And what we need to do to make this go true, we need our high button to tell it to go true. Now, I'm going to give you a bit of a challenge at this point. What I've just described, why will it not work? So I'll let you think about why it won't work while we carry on with the next couple of lines before I tell you why it currently won't work. So we've guessed high. We then need to establish if the new card number is indeed higher or equal to the dealt card number. So we can say if new card number is equal to or greater than dealt card number, then do the following, and that should actually be greater than or equal to in that order. So if our new card is indeed equal to or greater than our original dealt card number, I should say, then what do? Well, we carry on with the sequence. So let's get back to why it will not work currently. Hopefully you got that one. It's because these two are not static, because the other script needs to tell this one that they are true. So let's change both of those to static, like so. Which also means that if we go to high button, let's save that script first. Let's go to our high button script. It does mean that down here we also need to say card control dot guess high equals true with a semicolon, and let's save that script. So let's go back to our card control. So basically what we're doing here is we're creating a sequence of events that occurs when we press the button. So let's say we've pressed it. That is now true. So this coroutine will run, which means it will wait for a second. The card will have already been dealt because the high button script will have done that. And now it's establishing whether we are correct or not. And if we are, what does it do? Well, let's have correct text display. So correct text dot set active true semicolon. After that, what happens next? Well, we need to basically switch over and say, well, obviously if it's incorrect, we need to do incorrect, so we'll do that as well. But for now, what we'll do is we will also turn off the high and low buttons. So let's add those as variables inside. Which script should we do? Let's have them in this script as well. I think it's probably wise, because this script is going to control so much, it's probably a good idea to allow this script to basically control the buttons as well. So let's add those down here. So public game object, and we'll have high button, and then we'll have public game object low button. And we'll also have the deal button as well, because we will need to reset everything at some point. Game object and deal button. So that means that we need to basically turn off these buttons as soon as we've guessed. So if guess high, let's turn off those two buttons, because if we've guessed high, we need both buttons to go off no matter what. So in our if guess high equals true section, we put high button dot set active false semicolon. Oops, we should actually close the bracket first. That would normally be the best thing to do. Low button dot set active false as well. So both of those have gone off. So we've got it correct. That's all great. Our text displays. And next thing we need to do is do, well, if we're wrong. So here we'll have else, and in open curly brackets, we will say incorrect text dot set active true semicolon and save. So in its simplest terms, what we've done here is we have dealt the card. We are going to say we think it's higher. If it is indeed higher, it should say correct. So to go through all of this, we are turning the buttons off so we can't repeatedly guess. It's then starting the coroutine. It's waiting a second after the card has been dealt, and then it's going to say correct or incorrect. So let's head back into Unity and test out what we've written so far. So we need to go to settings, and we need to go to this card control script here, because remember, we have a couple of variables that are now available to us. So correct text goes in there, incorrect text goes in there, high button, low button, and deal button. And let's save our scene and press play, and let's try this out. So deal card, 8, let's go high, and it should say correct. There we go. So we got it right. And obviously the low button currently won't work. It will still deal the card, but it won't actually do anything. There we go. So let's try and make this this high button just make it say incorrect. So high, obviously that's still going to be correct. Let's try once again. You'll find yourself doing this kind of thing when testing games all the time. Okay, so this is a good chance for us. High, it's a jack. Incorrect. So let's now get that low button working. So let's go back into card control. And down here, we can actually repeat this if we copy all of this down here and put guess low equals true. Obviously, we set both of those off still, so this still occurs. And instead of guessing higher, we're guessing lower. So hopefully you guys have guessed already. We can actually copy this coroutine, place it below, and just change it to guessing lower. And instead of having higher than or equal to, we change it to lower than or equal to right there. Now, one final thing that we're going to need to do is we need to turn those booleans back to false. So if we've guessed high, let's say guess high equals false. And the reason we can do this is because we've already activated this if statement. So even if we turn it off, we're still inside this if statement, which means it's still going to run. But obviously we need to reset those booleans because we're going to have another card dealt to us, and we constantly need to reset those. So once again, guess low equals false. Semicolon and save. So let's now check on all of this and make sure it works. So if we press play and deal ourselves a new card, low. Okay, so something has gone astray there. That's because we haven't actually set the low button to work. Classic. Low button, low card. Let's just make sure all of this works. And oh, of course, I know why. It's because in low button, we haven't told it what we're doing, have we? Because remember, in the high button, we have guess high is equal to true, but we didn't do it in low, of course. A nice, simple debugging session there. So card control, dot guess low equals true, semicolon, and save. Head back into Unity, and let's test this out. There we go. So deal card, low, correct. Excellent. Let's try once more, see if we can get it to say incorrect. Oh, it says correct again. So deal, low. Okay, you're just going to have to take my word for it on this one. It will work. Oh, there we go. Incorrect. Perfect. So we now have established the routine that can detect whether we are correct or not. So the process for recycling all of this comes down to, you can think of it as a flow chart. So we deal card, we choose either high or low, get it right, choose again, get it right, choose again, get it wrong, start all over again. And that start all over again comes back to, it should look like this to begin with. So it's kind of recycling the whole time. So it's a constant loop. So in order to get this down just right, we need to deal with the card control script. So in here, we're going to use sequencing, much like we have previously here with the yield return new wait for seconds function, or line, I should say, and allow ourselves to establish, yes, we're recycling everything here. So we have it set as active here if we've got it correct. But what we also need this script to recognize is the cards which are available to us. So we're going to need to create another set of variables, much in the same way we have with the high and low buttons. So we will go and say public game object, and we need the square brackets because this is going to be an array. Remember, once again, it needs to be 0 to 15. 0 and 1 are empty, so we need 2 to 15 here, and or rather 2 to 14, I should say, because they're the numbers for it. And we are going to call this something sensible. We'll have these as dealing cards, so they're the ones on the left. In fact, do you know what? We'll actually put dealing left cards, just so we do know where we're going with this. And then the same ones for the right side, which are the turning cards. So game object, square brackets for the array, turning right cards. Now, what we need to do here is a quick and simple way would just be to copy and paste. I mean, there are multiple different ways of doing all different kinds of code in Unity, and sometimes working out the most efficient way can take longer than working out the quick and convenient way. In this sense, because this is so simple, it doesn't really matter if this script has 100 lines or 1,000 lines. It's not going to make a difference at all on performance. When you get into the realms of tens of thousands of lines, that's when you will start noticing you're going to have to refine it more. So like I say, the amount of code that we're going to write in this script isn't going to matter one iota, not one bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to have all the cards turned off no matter what. And the reason for that is because we're going to redeal, as it were. So at this point, we need to establish the fact that the dealt card number and the new card number are two numbers, different, hopefully. Well, if they're the same, we know what we're doing with that. But it's this new card number which is going to become important, because that new card number is going to dictate which card will then display on the left-hand side, which is the dealing left card. So let's assume we have guessed high and we've got it correct. So there we go. That's displayed. We're going to yield return new. I'm going to copy that line of code and I'm going to wait for, let's say 3 seconds, because I would like to get round to adding a bit of animation to it and a sound effect and all that. So we'll give ourselves 3 seconds to say, yep, we got it correct. What do we do now? Well, what we need to do is place that card over on the left-hand side. But in order to do that, we do need to turn all the cards off. And like I said, this is going to be a bit tedious. We could use a loop if you wanted to. I guess it just depends how you want to do it. I'm going for quick copy paste convenience, really. So we need to say all of these cards dealing left and turning right go off. So dealing left cards dot set active. Oops, we need to put that in there, don't we? Dot set active and false semicolon after close bracket. So what we're essentially doing is we're going to put in here, we need to turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all of them off, and then turn on the card we actually need to display. So let's start with 2 and copy. So while I do this, I'm quickly going to explain why this is going to work. So essentially what we're doing is we are resetting all the cards, and I guess in a lot of ways we could also do this as a separate function, you know, another coroutine, I guess, start a coroutine within a coroutine. But at the end of the day, it's quick and easy just to kind of go through here. Again, maybe not the most efficient, but like I've said before, efficiency doesn't matter too much at this stage because all we're doing is just resetting things. So we have them there. So 9, 10, Jack, Queen, King, and Ace would be 14. So all of those left cards have now been turned off. However, we do need to turn one back on, and that's going to be whatever is in dealt card number. So that means that dealing left cards, and in square brackets, it should be new card number dot set active true. So that now means that whatever we were dealt to begin with, and we've chosen high, and let's say we've chosen high and the number come out is 10, 10 will now turn into that dealt card on the left. So then we can guess high and low once again. Obviously, we have to change the dealing cards. We've done that. So we need to do the turning cards. So basically, we can do the same once again. So if we say turning cards, and we need that to permanently stay off. That should be turning right cards. So you can see here how the sequence is indeed working. So each line represents a new line in the sequence, and you can see we're turning all these cards off to reset everything. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 2 more. So what I'm going to do is, rather than test out now, we're going to type all of this code out and then test to make sure all of this works. So in an ideal world, this will work perfectly right now. So we've chosen that, we've turned all the cards off. Now we're going to wait for, let's say, another second. So we can use yield, return new, wait for seconds, and extra second. At this point, because we've got it right, because it is correct, we need to turn the high and low buttons back on. So at this point, high button dot set active true, and low button dot set active false, and save that script. So ultimately, what we're doing is all these lines of code, although it looks a bit ridiculous to some degree, I would encourage you to refine that with what you've learned so far in this series and maybe what you know previously. If you have refined at any point, leave a comment, because, well, people love reading comments. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that. So, yeah, that now works. So let's use this to our advantage and do the same with the correct if we get a low card. So we can copy all those lines of code. I've said it multiple times. Yes, I know it's not efficient, but this is a simple version. And we place it here. So as long as we get it correct, it's all good. Now, the clever thing that we can do here is we can use the same kind of sequence here. So we're in the incorrect section, but instead of setting high button, low button on, just realized a high button, low button should be true, not false. I hope you guys were shouting at me for that one. Both of the high, low buttons should be on. So we're doing the false now. So incorrect text section, all of that goes below. And instead of high and low button coming on, we put the deal button on. So deal button .set active is true. So let's take that line of code all the way up to that, copy it, and place it here and save. So let's go over what we've actually done. So up until this point, we know all this works. We know that we're dealt the card. Here we can see, yep, we wait for a second, we've got it right. Then we wait for 3 seconds because, like I said, we're going to create some animation. We're going to create a sound effect to play, you know, card turning and a ding ding or something for getting it right. And all of them go off. It switches the card over to the left-hand side and turns all the right cards off, and then sets the buttons back on. And if we get it wrong, it does the exact same, but puts the deal button back on. Now, what I'm thinking is we may refine this. Like I say, I've just done this quick, simple, copy, paste, stick it in there. We may refine this depending on how you guys feel about all of this. But ultimately, if you do refine it, let people know in the comments because it's a great way to interact with other developers. So let's head back into Unity. Let it refresh, compile, and let's go to settings. And we have our card control script right there. We can see we have dealing left, dealing right. So let's set this to 15 and let's add all of these. So these are the left cards. So these are the the guess card deck, aren't they? Because they're the left-hand side. So we need to put 2 in there and add them all in. So the great thing about what we've done at the end of this tutorial is we have pretty much put together the entire sequence that we actually need for this game to function, because right now we're going to be able to go constantly through this. This is going to be like an endless loop of being able to guess right or wrong. And let's have the turning cards on the right side as 15 and then do the same. Yeah, so all of this is going to be pretty much done now. So the only real things that we've got left to do is add in all those little extras to make this more of a game. Things like a score, all stuff like that. I've missed out 5, haven't I? There we go. So I'm thinking the best way for us to go about this is have something called a streak. So we've got a streak of guessing, 2 cards in a row, 3 cards, 4 cards. We'll get around to saving that streak and, as I mentioned, some sound effects and all cool stuff. So added all these in now. Let's make sure our sequence works as intended. I've just saved the scene there. So let's press play and check this out. And if we get any bugs or errors, we know where we can go to debug. So deal card 4, let's guess high. It is high, correct. Okay, so we can see something has gone wrong there. So everything does seem to work, but it has placed the wrong card in the wrong section, it looks like. So it has turned everything off in the guess card deck, but it hasn't turned it off in the other one. So let's check our script and make sure we have this right. So let's see here. So as long as we turn all the cards off, it doesn't matter too much. So let's quickly establish what we've done here. So all of these, so left cards, we've turned dealing left card, new card number, set active is true, which means if we go to settings and we go to dealing left cards, so this one, there we go. So we have to change that to guess card. So we just need to change that one around. So this line of code now needs to go at the end. And we'll set that as, that should be turning there. So turning, and that should be right. So that will replace everything that is on the left. So we can use that line of code, take it out of there, place it at the bottom, take it out of there, place it at the bottom, and once again, take it out of there and place it at the bottom. So the next thing we need to establish is we need to have the dealt card number become whatever that new card number is. So before we test out our current sequence, we need to change the numbers around because the dealt card number is always going to be the one that gets compared. So the last thing to do would be make dealt card number equal to new card number. So at the very end, after we've set the buttons back on, dealt card number equals new card number. And that line of code gets copied and placed in each section, because now that will make an infinite loop of being able to guess and get it right. So let's head back into Unity, let it compile, press play, and let's go. So hi, and we got that right. So that should become 4. And oh, we do need to get rid of that, don't we? So before we go any further, let's actually turn off the correct and incorrect buttons, rather text, I should say. So we have correct text.set active is true. So let's turn that off at the same time that we change the number over. So that's false. And then on this one too, that becomes false. And then also the incorrect text, that needs to go as well to false. And up to this one where we have the other one and false. So ultimately you can see the sequence of every possible option here. That is essentially why I've done it this way, the long copy paste way, because we can see each sequence of events depending on the possibility of the outcome. So make sure that is saved, head back into Unity, and let's test this one final time. Let's see how far we can get. So let's deal. 7, I think high. We got that right. So 9 should go over here. And I think low. Oh, we got that right. And there we go, 6 there, high. Oh, we got that wrong, incorrect, so we start again. So there's one more little bug we found. So we have the 3 there, so it's putting that there. So we need to stop that from occurring, and we need to redeal the card. So let's go back into here. And if we get it wrong, so incorrect, that now means that this line of code actually doesn't really need to be there, does it? Because we're resetting. So in the incorrect ones, that gets reset. And logically, I don't even think we need this one. So we can cut that line of code as well, because if we're incorrect, we are literally starting the whole thing again. So we don't need to set anything to carry on that sequence. So for the final time, let's try and get an incorrect one to see this whole thing work correctly. So deal, I think low. So that should be incorrect. And then we should get the deal button and start again. 7, high. Nope, we're wrong again. Let's try and get the right one now. So deal, 6, high, queens. That should be correct. Brilliant. So queen over here. And perfect. Okay, so the whole sequence is now looped and cycled depending on what you choose. We've got that down. So that is pretty much the basics of how to create a high-low game. From here, we're going to go a little bit further and develop this into something a little bit better. So, a simple score. Like I said, if we get it right, we add 1. If we get it wrong, we reset. we're going to need a script which is going to keep track of our score and update our screen whenever we change it. So let's right click, create, C# script. We'll call this global score. And let's open that up in Visual Studio. Not sure why it keeps opening other scripts up. I wish you'd stop doing that. Yeah, so we need to open up that global score script. And obviously it's going to be completely blank. We're going to deal with UI elements in this. So, I think we've done it before, have we? No, I don't think we have. So we're going to add at the top of this script a namespace which allows us to change elements of the UI on our screen. In this case, it's going to be the text itself. So we're going to have a text box on our screen that basically says either 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever for our score. But in order to do that, beneath using Unity Engine, we need to type using Unity Engine .ui semicolon. Reason being is because we need to be able to interact with UI elements in this script. So let's add in our variables. The first variable we're going to add in is going to be an integer, which is going to be the score or the streak, depending on whatever you want to call it. So let's have public static int for integer, not indexer. Why has it done that? Int, and let's call this current score, semicolon. And the reason it's static is because other scripts are going to interact with this one to tell this script what the score actually is. Now we can get rid of the start method and the annotations. We do not need them. And essentially what we do need to do is say in void update, we need to check what our score is and update it on our screen. But in order to do that, we actually need to have something on our screen which contains the score. So let's head back into Unity. Doesn't matter whether you save the script or not at this point. And let's add in something at the top. So I'm going to go to Game Object. I'm going to go to UI, and let's have a panel to start with. And you can see it does cover the entire screen, but let's adjust this now. So we can use our Rect tool, and we can shift this around up here, and just make it appear a bit kind of tidier at the top. And obviously you can take a little bit more time to do this than what I do. And inside this panel, let's have the text that says our current streak. So right click, let's go to UI, go to text. Let's have this text say streak. But actually, now I think about it, let's actually make sure this panel is at the top. So we need it there. So it's going to be that. So it's going to be top stretched. There we go. So our streak, I might have that in capital letters actually. Streak, colon, 0. Let's make this a little bigger. So let's have font size, let's say 24. And let's have it this side. So we've aligned it there. So I'm going to put that round about there, I think. And yeah, that should do. So hopefully our streak will increase, as we want to. So let's have that as 0. And again, I'm just doing this really quickly. You can go a little bit more in depth with how your UI looks. These are just the mechanics that you need to actually get this working. Let's rename this text to have streak score. And this is going to be the text box that we update within the global score. So let's go back into global score, and we can say here, if we add in the variable public game object, and this can be score display semicolon. So score display is going to be that object. So we need to access the components inside score display, which is known as the text. And there's a subcomponent also called text, and that's where we typed streak colon 0. So we can use that to our advantage. So we can say score display dot get component, and in spiky brackets text with a capital T, and then open close bracket. At this point, we need to make sure that we are getting the correct subcomponent. So, like I say, on that one, we've gone to get component. So we're getting one of these. We've told it we're getting this component. And the subcomponent that we need to edit is going also to be called text. But it's still a capital T here. But we don't use that capital T. So when dealing with that subcomponent, just keep in mind the main component is capitalized. This subcomponent of text isn't. So we need to go back to our script and say dot text with a lowercase t. Now we need to tell it what the text actually is. So in this case, we say it's equal to, and then we have the quotes, and we'll say streak, colon, space, and then another quote. We don't put any numbers here. The reason why is because we can use that current score integer to do that for us. So if we say plus current score, semicolon, and save, that script will now update our score whenever it changes. So if we head back into Unity, and let's say, for example, we changed our streak score text, let's just put gibberish there. When we press play, we haven't applied the script, it will still say whatever. But the clever thing about this script when we actually apply it is it will manipulate anything in there. So you can see I've changed that. The script doesn't exist in the scene, so it's obviously not going to do anything. However, if we put global score onto our settings up here and then tell it which one, so what I'm going to do is I'm quickly going to close up some of these components. So let's press them arrows to close them up because we don't need those right now. Let's add our score display, which is our streak score over there. So now this script knows that this needs to be changed. So even though when we press play last time, it still says if we change now, it is going to say streak 0. So that means that this script is now in complete control of our score. So once again, we can use that to our advantage. If we go into card control, and if we get it correct, which we have right here, we can now change this. So under correct text.setActive true, let's now put global score dot current score plus equals 1. And then we can use that same line of code further down here. And once again, because we've got it correct, we add 1. So the question is, what do we do if we get it wrong? Well, when the incorrect text is displayed, let's go back here, and instead of global score.current score plus equals 1, we say equals 0. So we've reset our score nice and easily right there. And save. Head back into Unity. And let's press play. And that should change to our streak. So deal card, I think it's going to be lower. It is, so that's changed to 1. So let's see if we can get this up to 2 now. So high. Oh, it's going to reset as we saw there. I at least wanted to get it to 2. So that's correct. I'm thinking maybe we should speed this up a little bit once we've got our sound effects and everything in and our animations and stuff, because it is a little bit slow at the moment. Low. Ooh, wrong again. And oh gosh. So our streak didn't even increase at all there. So you can see that every possible scenario is covered for right now. It's doing quite well. So low, and that should go to 2. Great. So everything looks like it is working as intended now. So the reason this is quite long is because my intent is to add in maybe a high score and save a high score. So when you exit the application and come back onto it, it's saved your high streak. What I might do is change this. I'm not convinced about how it looks, so I'm going to change that to black. Maybe change the alpha a little more and change the text to white. Maybe italic? Who knows? Let's see. Let's see how that looks. Again, I think it's all down to you and how you want to customize your game, really. So that looks okay. We'll stick with that. Cool. So much in the same way as I did with the textures, a link to the audio files that we'll be using in this tutorial will be in the pinned comment below. So firstly, let's create a folder for audio down here in our assets section. So right click, create, and folder. Let's call it audio. And let's go into that folder. So I'm going to bring in these 4 audio files. Remember, all you need to do is do the same as me, drag and drop. Make sure you have unzipped those files though, because if you haven't, you won't be able to import them. So click that link to download them, unzip them, and then bring them into Unity. So we have the background music, we have the correct sound, we have the deal card sound, and we also have the incorrect sound. So I'm just getting my headphones on so I can make sure that this is not going to be too loud for you guys. Hopefully it won't be. So let's start with the background music. So let's go to our settings and let's right click, create empty, and let's create a bit of a tree going on here so we can keep things tidy. Let's rename this to audio. And then I'm going to hold Control, press D to duplicate, and then drag that duplicate back into audio so it creates, you can see, a tree going all the way down. Let's have this as just simply BGM. So that's short for background music. We can drag and drop this BGM either on this section here or over here in the big empty space in the inspector panel. So let's just drag it there. You'll see all of this here. We don't need to worry about much of this, to be honest. A couple of things that we can play around with is play on awake, which will be, it starts whenever this object becomes active. So when we press play to start the game, it will indeed start playing. We also want to loop it so it plays constantly, and it's about 50 something seconds of a little tune that will play. I am going to change this volume down because I think it's fairly loud, as we can probably see here. It does look quite loud. So I'm going to change this to very low, so 0.05. I will get around to the pitch in just a second, but let's see how this currently sounds. Not sure whether that's going to be loud for you guys, but we can play around with the pitch. Sounds crazy. So depending on how you want your background sound to play, so keeping it as 1 means it is standard. It's as the file comes. If you have it as 1.5, obviously it's a higher pitch. It'll sound sped up, it'll sound higher. See? So I'm going to keep it as 1 for now. So the other 3 audio files that we have are going to be set up a little differently. The reason being is because those 3 audio files we only want to play at certain points in our game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Control, press D on BGM to duplicate, and then I'm going to drag the deal card sound over here to where it says high-low BGM, so on the audio clip. So deal card, I'm going to untick play on awake and untick loop. I'm going to have the volume back as full and keep the pitch as 1. Let's also rename this to deal card. And let's duplicate one more time and one more time after that. So let's change the first duplicate to correct and the second duplicate to incorrect. Now you don't have to use the same audio files I do. They're just there for your convenience. You can use any that you want to, literally anything. If you don't want to use the same background music as me, you don't have to, you can change it. So let's change the deal card sound on correct to be the right one, and the same with incorrect. So we now have those audio files in place, but how do we make it so as when we press and we get a new card, we get the deal card sound? Well, that's actually really easy. And we can actually do the whole thing inside one single script. And that script is going to be the card control. So we need to set 3 more variables of a different type in here. So if we scroll to the top, let's set those 3 variables. The first one public, audio source. My voice is going there. Audio source. And this one is going to be card deal. Next one, public, audio source. This one is going to be correct card. And then the last one, public, audio source, incorrect card. So those are the three audio sounds that we want to play at different times. So we now have to establish where and when we put the lines of code to activate those sounds. And you have to look at it logically and think, well, as soon as we press to guess high or low, this section here will run. So why don't we use this section here to play the card deal sound? Real easy. Let's do that. So card deal dot play, open close bracket and semicolon. And then that can be done as well down here. So every time we guess either high or low, that means that the card deal sound will play out. And the same thing will happen if we do, well, correct or incorrect. So we can say correct card dot play if we get it right up here. So as soon as we set this text active to say correct text, we will say correct card dot play, open close bracket with a semicolon. And let's copy that line of code and go to our other section. And let's now do the incorrect text. So incorrect card dot play. And down here, we need to have incorrect card dot play and save. So that will deal with the constant loop. The last thing we're going to need to do is the original deal card script. And if you remember, this is the big deal card button. So we do need to add it in here as well. The loop section is completely fine. We've just done all of that. We need to add it here as well. So public, audio source, remember, capital A, capital S, and we'll have this as deal card, which means that as soon as we press the button, we need to say deal card dot play, open close bracket, semicolon, and save. So that's all there is to it. Those couple of lines of code will now make sound effects play whenever we do certain things. We just need to assign them to the correct scripts in our settings object. So let's go back into Unity. Let's go to our settings and let's find the correct scripts that we need. So we're going to need to deal with card control here. And let's close up those sections. And here you can see there are the three audio sounds. So deal card is that one. Correct card is that one. Incorrect card right there. And remember, we had one more inside deal card, which is that one there, which is also going to be that deal card sound effect. Let's save our scene and let's test this out. There we go. And let's go high. Cool. And low. Oh, we got it wrong. Let's see how far we can get. High. Oh, let's see if we can change the deal card pitch to 2. And let's see how that sounds. Okay, cool. High. Nice. Doing well. High. Okay, so we can see there everything is working as intended. I cannot see any problem with that. It seems to be working quite well. So saving a high score is actually relatively simple. It doesn't require too much coding, but it does require us to use something called player prefs. Player prefs are a way of storing information that can be reloaded into Unity even after the application has been closed. So to start with, let's create some text up here which represents our high score. So we currently have this right here, as you can see. So let's duplicate this to make it become what will be our high score. So streak score, hold control, press D to duplicate, and we'll call this high score. And I'm going to change the text to say just something quick and short, best and 0. So I'm going to align this to the left hand side, and I'm going to bring it across to probably about there. That should do. So we'll have our current score here, and our best will always be loaded in here. So by default, the very first time we start the game, it will be 0 anyway. So let's leave it as 0. So all of this is going to be done in our card control script. Not card control, our global score script. We're dealing with score, aren't we, of course? So global score, my apologies. So let's go into the global score script. Now, what we'll need to do here is when the script loads, we're going to need one instance of that high score loaded. And every time the score is greater than whatever that score is, then we need to resave it. So firstly, let's create another variable here. So public int, and this one is just going to be called high score, semicolon. Now we are going to create another method here, and I think we deleted it a couple of tutorials ago when I said, well, we don't need it. I think we do actually need it because we're going to need to load that high score. So let's have void start, and if it does come up private, don't worry. It doesn't need to be private, so we can get rid of that. So void start. And what we do here is we have to make high score equal to whatever would be in that player pref. So high score equals player prefs dot get int. So GET capital INT. And I know this may seem a little bit weird that we're doing the loading before we're even doing the saving, but in the long run, it's easier doing it this way. So playerprefs.getInt, and in brackets and quotes, the name of the player pref where something will be stored. Now at this point, we can call it anything. Whatever we put in these quotes doesn't matter as long as we use the same actual player pref throughout this code. So let's call this something relative to what we're doing. Let's say best score high low. And again, like I say, it doesn't matter what it can be called. It can be called purple monkey dishwasher. It doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter. As long as you type it the same when you load and save. So close the quote, close the bracket, semicolon. So what will happen here is high score will become equal to whatever that player pref is. First time you start the game, it will be 0, so it will load 0. If we get a high score of 3, when we load it back in, it will be 3. So at this point, we now have to establish what we need to do with this, because we also need to make it display on our screen. Remember we did this with score display, and we displayed the score here? Well, we can do the same with the best display. So public game object, we'll have this best display, semicolon. And after we've loaded in that player pref down here, below it, we just need to put best display dot get component, spiky brackets, text with a capital T, remember it's the same as this section here, dot, we forgot the parentheses, dot text equals, and I think we had best colon space, close the quote, and then plus high score, semicolon. So now our best score is also displayed on our screen, but we'll only update the once at this point because we only have it in the start method. Next thing we need to do is we need to establish whether we need to overwrite what the best score is. So down here in void update, we need to think about this a little bit methodically, because we need to fully understand whether we truly do need to save the score or not. So we need to say if, and we need to say basically, is current score higher than high score? So if current score is greater than high score, which even if we just get 1, it will be greater than it. So if it is greater than it, then what we do is we say player prefs dot set int. So we're setting an integer rather than getting. So a lot of people do get mixed up between set and get. Get is to retrieve, set is to place. So set int, and in brackets, we need to then put the string, which is our player pref. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this up here, copy it, and paste it. Now, the reason I've done that is simply because I don't want to mistype it, press the wrong key, because if it's mistyped even by one single letter or one single, punctuation mark, it's not going to work. They have to be identical. Like I said, it doesn't matter what you call it, as long as they are identical in both loading and saving. So we now need to put a comma and tell it what value we want to put in that high score, in best score, high, low. And we want to put in current score. Like so. And close bracket. And semicolon. So what's happening here is after we have updated on the screen, we're saying if current score is greater than high score, then what we need to do is save whatever our high score is. And ultimately, what we do need to do is, this may end up in a bit of a loop, but I don't think it really matters too much. I mean, the idea of what we're doing obviously needs testing. Whenever you develop, you always need to test no matter what. So for now, let's see how this performs in Unity. So let's save and head back into Unity. Let it compile. Head up to the settings object, and we do need to set that best display object. So let me close up these cards because we don't need them there. And we do need to put this high score over here. I'm going to save my scene and press play. So at this point, we can see our streak is 0. High. Yep. Okay, let's carry on. Low. 4. Yep. Okay, so I'm thinking, should we update the best as well? So I'm going to stop this now. So we got 2 there. So fingers crossed when we load this up, our best should say 2. And it does. So that works. That works as intended. Now the next thing to test is just to make sure that it doesn't overwrite a lower number. But before that, what I want to do is also update our best score if our score is better. So let's go to global score once again. And let's take this. And we're also going to place it down here. Make sure this is only inside the if statement inside the update method. And change it to current score. So what this will do is it will update both our standard score and our best score if we are beating our high score. So like I say, what we need to test now is the fact that we don't overwrite. So this should still load too. Yep. So let's deal and let's say hi. Okay, so that was incorrect. So let's deal, let's say hi. Another incorrect one. And let's just make sure the best has not overwritten with 0, which it hasn't. So deal, hi. Yep, we got that right. We've got 1, so let's make sure that 1 doesn't overwrite that best of number 2. Perfect. So now let's finally test this out and make sure that our streak and best do match up. Oh wow, we're not having much luck here, are we? We're really not. So high. Oh wow. Wow, that's shocking, game. That's shocking. Okay, so low. 10. Let's go low again. And I'm thinking low again. So we should, hopefully we get this right, and we should see both of these update. Oh! Unbelievable. Unbelievable game. You're fixed. Okay, so we've got 1. That's good. Let's go low. That's good. Let's also go low again. Unbelievable. I mean, yeah, I couldn't plan this even if I tried to do that. My best streak is 2. Okay, so either way, I know this will work. See, our best is still 2, which obviously is a good thing. So I'm thinking next tutorial, what we'll do is... Oh, hang on. I think we might actually do this now and get to 3. There we go. They both update. So... yeah, we're doing quite well now. So even if we exit the game, even if, you know, we just quit it, come back into it, it will have saved our best score. So our best is now 4. So what is a splash screen introduction? Well, a splash screen introduction is a quick and simple way of kind of introducing the game, you know, showing what it's called, who made it. So you always see it when you play any type of video game, you know, it's like maybe a black screen and it fades in with the developer and publisher and that kind of thing. So we're going to do something a little bit similar with this. I'm thinking maybe start with a white screen and some text fades in, says high-low card game, fades out, and then we're into the game. So based on that as well, I think we're going to deal a little bit with the background music. So basically I want it to only start when we are on this current screen. So when we're in the little splash screen, I don't want it to play at all. Now, the way we're going to do this, I'm just trying to get my headphones again there. So the way we're going to do this is we're still going to deal in the same scene. And ultimately, we don't need to change scenes in all of this. You know, some games do have multiple scenes, but we don't need them in this one. So firstly, let's start by introducing the white background. So let's go to Game Object, UI, and let's go Raw Image. Let's set the anchoring to stretch, and let's set everything to 0 so it covers the entire screen. And remember what I've always said, the lower down it is in all of this, then the most forward it becomes. So if we were to press play now, the game would function, but we wouldn't be able to play it because this raw image is in the way. So let's rename this raw image to splash image. And let's also add some text. So game object, UI, let's go with text. Let's have it dead center of everything. So let's shift it to center, maybe there. Alignment center, and I'll just have this called high, low, card, game. And, you know, that's just what I'm going to call it. You can obviously call it something awesome. You can make it look cool. You can do other things. I guess it's up to you. Like I say, I always show you the mechanics. You just work with it. So let's have that like that. So what I'm going to do now is take the background music and I'm going to disable it. So I'm going to turn it off. So if we press play, this is all we see. So the game, again, still functions, just that we can't play because this is in the way. So now let's rename that text to, say, intro text. And I kind of like simplicity. That's why I've just gone for this white screen with that. I am a big fan of simplicity. So now, what do we do? Well, let's actually create some animations. So this intro text, I am going to set the color alpha 0. And you can see that's faded out there. So let's now create another folder in our assets. So right click, create folder, and we'll call this animations. And in here, this is where we're going to store the animations that do various different things. So we're going to go with a fading effect for that intro text to appear on our screen. So it'll fade in, fade out, and then we can begin the game. So we have the color set as 0 on the alpha. So let's set it as 255 and then 0 again. So what we need to do is click on the animation tab. And I think I mentioned it much earlier on that if you don't have it, you can click these little dots here, click on add tab, and you'll find animation right there. Next, we need to click on create, and we can call this one text fade, and click save, and you'll see this appear down here. First things first, we need to click this record button here. So we are now recording the animation. And these are all keyframes. You'll notice this one here is 0, and we're working in 60 frames a second, because I like 60 frames a second. And so basically, the keyframe 0 is the very start of it. So we need to set the current status of our text. Now, we're only dealing with the alpha to make it fade. So let's just set this. So all you need to do is click on the color, wiggle that around a bit, and then set it back to 0. And you'll notice these little nodes appear here. We've now set the alpha on our text to 0 to start off with. Next, what we need to do is after a second, so 60 frames, or you could actually click here to do 1 second. It's up to you. So after a second, we'll set the alpha to 255. Cool. So now it will display on our screen. So after another 2 seconds, we still want it to be there, but then we'll fade it out again. So what we'll do is we'll go 2 seconds from here, so 120 frames further from 60. So that's frame 180. And at that point, I'm going to wiggle the alpha again and set it back to 255. The reason I've done that is because that then creates another one of these nodes further down the line. So after another 60 frames, another second, we're going to have the alpha set as 0. So by frame 240, we want the alpha to be back to 0, and that will fade it out. Once we've done that, we can press the record button once again, and we've basically created that animation. Next thing to do is head back to the project window, and you'll notice 2 new assets. One of them is the controller that controls everything animation-wise on an object, and the other is the animation itself. Make sure we click the animation itself, and then up here, untick loop time. Reason being is we only want it to play the once. Let's see what it looks like now. High-low card game. Fade out. Cool. So now let's make it so as this splash image, which is the white background, also fades out after we've displayed that high-low card game. So let's click on splash image. Let's click on animation once again, and let's click on create, and we'll have splash fade. And let's press the record button once again. And remember, we need to set that first keyframe, and we're dealing with the alpha once again because we're going to fade this out. So click on color, and down here on the alpha, just jiggle it around a bit so it flashes, and then bring it to 255. So by frame 240 of our other animation, we had completely faded out. So let's go to frame 240 of this animation, and we need to also keep it as 255. That way it remains white for the whole time that our intro text fades in and fades out. So after that, we then go to frame 300, and then we can set the alpha to 0, and it will fade out. Then we can press the record button once again to stop, head to project, click on that splash fade, and click on that loop time, and let's press play. Now, this introduction of this splash screen will work, but the game itself will not. Reason being is because we're not able to click anything because this is still active. So we now need to create a script which will allow us to continue the game and start the audio and just carry on as normal. So let's go to our scripts folder. Let's right click, create, C# script. We'll call this intro. So this is just a quick introduction sequence to our game. So let's open it up in Visual Studio. So what objects do we need here to make all of this work? Well, firstly, we need those 2 UI objects. So let's go public, game object, splash white. Next, public, game object, and splash text. And finally, we're going to need that background music to begin playing, aren't we? So we're going to need public, game object, BGM, starter. semicolon. And remember, because we're not actually dealing with the audio source component with this background music, we're just turning it on. It doesn't need to be an audio source variable, just a game object one. So much in the same way as we've done previously with creating a sequence, we need to use a coroutine for this sequence as well. So that means that if we say down here, enumerator, remember, not enumerable, enumerator splash start, open close bracket, open curly bracket. Now our sequence lasts exactly 5 seconds, but I want the music to start after 4 seconds. So as it's fading into the game, I want the music to start. So yield, return, new, wait 4 seconds, and that's going to be 4. At that point, the next thing in our sequence is going to be bgm starter.set active, and that's going to be true, semicolon. Now we need to wait 1 more second for that white splash screen to disappear completely. So that's also going to be yield, return, new, wait 4 seconds, and in brackets 1. At that point, we do then need to turn off at least the splash white. It may not matter too much about the splash text, but depending on how big it is still active on the screen, and realistically we could do with not having it active on the screen. So I am going to turn it off here with the splash white. So splash white dot set active, and in brackets false, and splash text dot set active, and in brackets also false. And next what we need to do is we need to get rid of void update because we don't need it. We don't need the annotations either. We do, however, need to start the coroutine right here. So start coroutine, and in brackets the name of that coroutine that we've just written. If yours is splash start, just like mine, it would indeed be splash start. If yours is different, just make sure you have the right name there. Open close bracket, semicolon, and save. So this short script will control the little splash screen introduction to the game and allow us to play the game normally after it's finished. So let's head back into Unity. Remember, this has to go on our settings. So drag and drop intro onto the settings. And we just need to set those 3 variables. So splash white is the splash image. Splash text is the intro text, and BGM starter is BGM. I'm going to save that now and press play and see all of this work as intended. Cool. And there we go. Let's see how far I can get. Low. Hey, I got that one. Well done, Jimmy. And hi. Wow, I'm doing quite well here. I am impressed. Oh, there we go. Incorrect. So every time that we, close the game out, restart, you will just get that quick little intro sequence. And this can be a logo if you want to. It can be anything you want. You can do it in whatever order you want. It could be any color you want. It doesn't have to be white. It could be black. It could be red. It could be green. Anything at all. So up till this point, that's pretty much the development of that simple game done. And I would hope that you guys have taken it a bit further, made it look prettier than what I've done, refined those mechanics, made it better, made it look awesome. And I always love to see what people have done when creating things from these tutorials. So we've pretty much built the game. It looks good. Well, hopefully yours looks good, a lot better than mine. But some settings can be refined and changed to make this a complete build. So if we go to Edit and go down to Project Settings, there are a multitude of things that we can change here if we go through. A lot of these aren't going to matter one little bit most of the time. For example, if you want to implement ads on mobile devices, obviously that's important, but this isn't really a series designed for that, I guess. Another way is controlling time. For example, if you want things to speed up, you control the time scale here. But the things I really want to look at are the player and the quality. So the player is not literally the player, it's the actual application that's playing the game. So you could have your company name here, so JV Game Studios, if I can actually spell it right. Your product name, high-low card game. You know, it could be whatever. Your version number would be here, so 1.0 is the first one. Now, these default icons are what you would have appear as, for example, on the Android or Apple, iOS, whatever app. So on your home screen, that would be the icon there. For PC, it would just be the standard icon. And you can see here that we are able to change various options for different builds. So let's start with the PC, Mac, and Linux. Obviously, the icon will be here. It will just replicate from what you have up here. So whatever icon you want, texture, it can be here. So for example, if I were to use, let's just use the Jack of Hearts as the icon. It's not going to look perfect, but that would be our icon. Further down, we have resolution and presentation. We have the option to kind of show how it's presented. You can change however you want to. I always say that most of the time you'll find that Unity's default settings are pretty much perfect for what you'll want to do, especially if it's your first game, if you're early in development, if you're new to it, all that kind of stuff. You'll usually find that a lot of these settings are perfectly fine. Now, splash image is not the same as what we created last time. So although we created a little splash screen, a splash image is something that displays on PC if you open it up. I don't think Unity does it by default anymore, but you have the option to set your keys and all stuff like that. It's the little image that you see when you start the game up, but before you get into it. Next, we have some other settings. So we have rendering settings, and we can also go further down and take a look at a lot of these, but a lot of them just don't really matter for what we're creating here. I don't really think you need to go too far into the other settings, but it might be worth just kind of hovering over, seeing what a couple of things do. That's one bit of advice I can always offer when it comes to Unity. If you hover over some of these settings, it gives you a nice little introduction as to what they are. None of them are really necessary for what we've created here, but if you want to learn a little bit more, have a quick look. We can also go for UWP. It's the same kind of things here. You'll find everything is replicated. So you can see store logo. You can have them here if you want to. And obviously it's not applicable on the platform with the icon. You would know why if you have played games on UWP. Obviously you can do all of this. Again, resolution presentation, the splash image, it's all here for you, other settings. And we also have publishing settings. Again, this might be a little bit important to some degree, but once again, you don't need to worry too much about what any of this is. As long as we have the settings that are good enough to publish the game somewhere, maybe on the Android Play Store or on Itch.io or Steam or something. Same again with iOS. It's pretty much the same kind of simplicity to all of this. And again, with Android, you can see all of this. And obviously, I need to update my API here. But again, if you are way up to date with all of this, you'll more than likely have that done. You can, if you quickly Google that message, it will take you to where you need to go if you do indeed get that same message. So the next thing down here is quality. Now the quality is just a basic way of showing, how detailed everything is. But because this is a very simplistic 2D style game, it doesn't matter about any of these settings at all. If you're creating a massive open world first person I would say cyberpunk, but we all know what happened with that last year and how that started off. Yeah, so I think ultimately you don't need to worry too much about settings, but it might be worth playing around. You can take very low and you can rename them as well if you want. Rather than ultra, you can have epic, for example. It's entirely up to you. But a lot of these for a 2D game like this aren't going to matter too much because we've just got the bare bones of our game. So everything, again, by default, should be pretty decent. So now if we go to File, Build Settings, and remember this from a long time ago, this is where you would build and run your game. So whether you're doing it for PC, Mac and Linux, so for example, if we built this for PC instead of Android, remember when we originally switched platform back then, it took, I can't remember, was it 20, 30 seconds? Now it will probably take a little bit longer to switch platform here because the game is slightly bigger than what it was when we had nothing in it. Let's see how long this is going to take. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So if it goes more than 30, it's definitely more than last time. And it's opened a script up for some reason. Thanks for that. So yeah, it took maybe a couple of seconds longer than last time. Either way, let's say we want to build and run for PC. All we need to do is, well, we could build it on its own, or we could build and run. And then all you would need to do is just, let's create a new folder and say hi, low. In there, select folder, and it will build. And it'll take a couple of moments to kind of put it all together. But essentially, all it's doing now is building everything. You'll see things disappear, reappear, flicker on screen while it's building. Don't worry, it's still doing what it needs to do to get everything built. So the same would apply for pretty much any target platform that you want to build for. So you're at this point now. Where do you want to go with your development? Thanks, Avast. Wow, that was loud. Okay, so it's built now. Perfect. Okay, so let's close that to get rid of Avast. Yes, yeah. All right, thank you, Avast. Thank you, Avast. Thank you, not thank you. Okay, so like I was saying, you've built all of your game now, you're happy. Where do you want to go with development from here? Well, I always say to refine the game that you've built. Make it look better than what I have done. As I would say, I show you the mechanics. It's then your job to go further, make it look better, bigger, more refined. You've learned everything there is to build this little simple high-low card game now. If you take a look on my channel, there is tons, literally tons to learn. If you want to go another step further and maybe make a kind of a cookie clicker style game, I've got one for that. That's a little bit more advanced, but the same style as this series. I have a lot of introduction to 3D, you know, a survival horror. I have even a series on to make a simple Grand Theft Auto style game as well. Tons of different styles, first-person shooters, Resident Evil clones, all that kind of thing. If you want to go a little bit further than that, there is a lot of documentation that Unity themselves provide that you can learn. But I think it's really dependent on your own skill level and where you feel you're at. If you feel that you aren't up to scratch, you know, don't worry, we all start somewhere. And sometimes even just these little series really help people and propel them into, you know, immense learning capabilities, and you can just learn so much. So my recommendation would be, if you want to go further than this, take a look at what I have on my channel, on my playlists. And if you want to go even further, maybe start interacting with Unity themselves on their website and just see what you can do. Build projects, put them out there, let people play. You know, I always recommend Itch.io as a good PC platform to let people try games out. So if you want to build something, put it there. Why not? I play games on there quite a lot. I always test them on my channel as well because I like to see what people have built. So guys, I want to thank you so much for sticking with me for, it's probably going to be about the past 2.5 hours throughout all of this now. And it's been a great journey. We built a cool game, and hopefully I will see you around in one of my other tutorials. Until then, thank you very much for watching, guys.